Hello, and welcome to Shortcut Up CNC. Today we're going to talk a little more about my gadget I've been working on. And first, we're going to bring up a job, and I'm bringing it up in a metric standard to start with. So we got our job set up there, and of course, it's a huge sheet. I'm not really familiar with millimeters that much. I use inches a lot. I'm from the US. So, US of A. Anyway, uh, we'll go ahead and bring the gadget into play. And what this does is it draws a grid of vectors both in the horizontal and the vertical position, depending on the panel width, panel heights, sizes. And it fits it to the size of the jobs sheet that you're working to. And you also have a clamp margin, and the clamp margin can be any size it needs to be. And if you're not using a clamp margin for clamps, you're using a vacuum hold, you put 0 in here. Now, this automatically comes up in inches, being such a gadget made here in the US of A. So I put in this little box here for changing the units. If you click on it, it goes to millimeters. And here we have our standard defaults for the millimeters. It's the same size sheet, only it's in millimeters instead of inches. So anyway, let's go back to the inches. Well, actually, we're in millimeters here. We'll leave it in millimeters. And it's actually, if you wanted to, this is the last used measurement that I used. So I'm going to change it back to a standard default, which is 304.8. So it doesn't always bring it back to the actual defaults of the sheet. It'll bring it back to the last used measurements that you used either in metric or in your inches standard. So if I click back on inches, we have 12, 12, and okay, everything's the way the defaults are. If I put it back on millimeters, now it's picking up what I last put in there. I changed it, and now it's got the last used information. So anyway, you got also here compensate for tool diameter. If you don't want it to compensate for tool diameter, fine, just cut them, and then your sheets will be cut a little undersized due to the fact of the tool cutting. In other words, a 12 by 12 sheet will be 11,875 if cut with a quarter-inch tool. So this is to compensate for the tool diameter. If you want it, click it. If not, leave it blank. And then we have center to the grid pattern if you have excess material. In other words, it'll center it to the sheet. Again, if you don't want it to center it to the sheet, you want it to leave it right. In this case, I've got the XY datum in the lower left-hand corner. So if I say not to center to grid, I go OK to it. It puts it in that left-hand corner, bottom left-hand corner. And there you've seen that box is drawn or the grid drawn. So now if I wanted to check this, I can go ahead and measure between each one of these vectors. And this one shows 311.15 millimeters, which is, let's see, if we take this and go out of here, and we go to my calculator here. We put in millimeters and then inches, and we actually put that in 311.15, and we say convert. It makes it 12.25 between the vectors. But when it's actually cut, you end up with 12 inches due to the fact that we have compensated for the tool involved. Or did we? You can actually go back to the gadget and see how the gadget was set up. Okay, change it over to millimeters. Yep, we did have the compensation for the tool diameter. So there you can see the grid pattern set up on a particular sheet. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this job, and I'm going to open the template up where it comes up in the inches standard. I'm going to be using 8 by 4 foot sheet, which is 96 by 48 inches. And we're going to use the lower left hand corner and the material surface. Okay, the sheet's set up. Now we'll go grab the gadget. It's already in the inches standard, so the only thing I need to change is to center it on the grid. It remembered everything from the metric standard and changed these items down here, but it didn't change this. It just put it in the default setup for the inches standard. So now I'll go ahead and click, and we're in inches, and inches in the gadget. We click OK, and there it centered it to the material. And we have our 12 by 12 panels. Now, it's not going to show 12 by 12 because we're compensating for the tool. See here, it shows 12.25. That's being a 0.125 cut on each side due to the tool, cutting tool. Okay, and also it puts the vectors on the individual layers if you want to just set up a tool path for the, let's say your tool paths are different from each other, and you wanted to have one set up one way and one set up another. You can do this with the layers to tool path association when you set up your tool paths. But just to show that they're separated, there's your vertical vectors. Bring the horizontal and click off the vertical vectors. So there you have a gadget that creates a grid for panels or for just cutting out squares. If you want to cut out a whole mess of squares for someone or some company, you can just set this up and let her rip. Thank you for watching Shark Cut Up CNC.